The deity of time and the creator of the Pokemon world have teamed up to create what is one of the strongest decks Pocket has seen thus far. This deck has been going on a rampage in online tournaments recently, all thanks to the undeniable synergy between its attackers. I'm Rose from TCG, and today we're going to break down how to play Dialga EX and Arceus EX in the Triumphant Light format. The pressure this deck puts on opponents in the opening turns of a game is relatively unique for a deck that starts off slower than most others. This is thanks to an incredible late game that forces opponents to set up quickly or risk getting completely run over. While the deck is a bit slow to start, the decent bulk and energy acceleration of Dialga gives the deck the buffer it needs to set up properly. That combined with a relatively flexible list of cards to play makes this deck really hard to stop. On the flip side, the piloting of this deck is pretty linear at its core, which makes its gameplay rather predictable for opponents. This all but necessitates the proper use of tool cards to maintain the edge this deck has over much of the meta. The primary attacker for this deck is Arceus EX, a 140 HP basic colorless type with the Ultimate Force attack. Similar to Pikachu EX, Ultimate Force does 70 damage plus an additional 20 for every Pokemon on your bench. This maxes out at 40 damage above Pikachu's Circle Circuit attack without the restriction of only using Lightning type Pokemon. While the attack cost in 3 energy is a bit hefty, Dialga's ability to accelerate energy is more than enough to take advantage of Arceus' strength. Its ability Fabled Luster also makes it completely immune to special conditions. This isn't super important in the current meta, but it's still worth noting. As one of the strongest and most versatile leads in the current meta, Dialga EX is the key to this deck's success. The 150 HP basic metal type is known for its Metallic Turbo attack. For 2 metal energy, this attack does 30 damage and attaches 2 metal energy to one of your bench Pokemon. Moving at its fastest, this attack allows this deck to attack with Arceus on the 3rd turn of every game. While this is pretty slow, the combination of Dialga's bulk and the consistency of the strategy makes it nearly impossible to lose before the late game. An inclusion that gives this deck an added layer of skill expression for outplays is Shaman. Both the Space-Time Smackdown and Triumphant Light prints add decent value to this deck, but we don't necessarily recommend playing both, as leaning into one over the other should net more consistent results. Space-Time Smackdown Shaman allows you to heal 10 damage from each of your Pokemon every turn, while Triumphant Light Shaman lowers the retreat cost of your active Pokemon by 1 energy as long as it's on the bench. You can use Shaman to add some durability to Arceus and Dialga, or make switching in the late game easier. Either way, Shaman is appreciated. Moving on to our items, we'll first start with Pokeball. Since this deck only runs basic Pokemon, Pokeball gets immense value. The most common use of this card is to ensure that you have an Arceus on the bench ready to receive energy from Dialga's Metallic Turbo attack, but it's also good for searching out Shaman or any other fill Pokemon you might be running. The only other item that's definitely worth looking at is Potion. With Arceus and Dialga sitting at 140 and 150 HP respectively, they're sitting right in the sweet spot of being knocked out in 2 hits by single point Pokemon. Surviving these hits is crucial against decks that don't have EXs for you to close out games against. It also helps to restore their health back to full from chip damage before taking hits from other EXs. Taking a quick look at tools, Rocky Helmet is huge for this deck. While the execution of it can be a bit tricky, chipping down bulkier EXs into knockout range for Arceus or dissuading opponents from attacking Dialga in the first couple of turns can both lead to success for this deck in critical situations. While Giant Cape isn't as consistently useful as Rocky Helmet, it can come in clutch by allowing Arceus and Dialga to survive hits that would otherwise knock them out. This doesn't come up against all decks, but can be pivotal against specific matchups. Moving on to the supporters, there's a pretty extensive list to experiment with, which is what makes this deck so flexible. The first of which is Professor's Research. There are many different combinations of cards that play into various situations with this deck, so getting through your deck as quickly as possible to ensure you have the right cards in hand is really helpful. Next up is Giovanni. While Giovanni has fallen out of favor for much of the meta, the combination of Arceus' 130 damage and Rocky Helmet gives Giovanni access to a lot of clutch opportunities, most notably against frailer EXs like Celebi, Leafeon, and Articuno. This deck probably sees the most use out of Giovanni of anything that's been meta in Pocket so far. While Sabrina is still struggling to find her definitive place in the current landscape, she's always worth testing. This deck doesn't have spread damage, which is usually an obvious sign to play Sabrina over Cyrus. However, this deck isn't always the best at knocking out EXs in one hit, which can make it hard to get Sabrina's full value. Any deck that plays EXs with 2 retreat costs is required to play Leaf. And thanks to Metallic Turbo's setup, Dialga in particular is one of the best users of Leaf. While Dialga can already retreat after using Metallic Turbo once, Leaf allows it to switch for free and is also helpful for switching a first Arceus into a backup in the late game. Sabrina's counterpart has pretty much established himself as a staple in the current meta. Regardless of whether or not a deck has spread damage, running at least one Cyrus in a deck is mandatory thanks to his ability to counter retreat so effectively. With the right conditions set up, Cyrus is the best when it comes to closing out games. The final supporter we'll look at is Mars. A bit of an underrated pick, Mars is in a pretty decent spot in the meta with the growing number of evolution Pokemon like Infernape and Rampardos, two decks that counter Arceus pretty well. Once you've mastered the piloting of this deck and feel like you have some space to test other supporters, don't be afraid to give Mars a try. While its uses are somewhat niche, Mew EX is pretty valuable as an alternative attacker for this deck in large part due to its synergy with Dialga. Since genome hacking also requires 3 colorless energy, it can be set up just as quickly as Arceus. Traditionally, Mew has been the perfect tech into Mewtwo EX and Charizard EX, and more recently, Palkia EX has found its way onto Mew's list. Matchups for this deck are pretty straightforward. Basically, anything that can one-shot Dialga before Arceus is set up has the potential to sweep through this deck. On the other hand, any decks that are prone to inconsistency give this deck more than enough time to build into full strength. Some decks Arceus EX and Dialga EX plays well into are Darkrai EX, Palkia EX, and Leafeon EX. Some decks to watch out for are Lucario, Gallade EX, and Infernape EX. If you're looking to play Arceus EX and Dialga EX, then here's the list we recommend. 2 Arceus EX, 2 Dialga EX, 1 Shaman from either Spacetime Smackdown or Triumphant Light, 1 Mew EX, 2 Pokeball, 2 Potion, 1 Giant Cape, 2 Rocky Helmet, 2 Professor's Research, 2 Giovanni, 2 Leaf, and 1 Cyrus. That wraps up our Arceus EX and Dialga EX deck profile. If you found this video helpful, feel free to like and subscribe. Be sure to check out our socials and join our community on Discord too. Good luck in your games, and thanks for watching.